I'm Dr. Joseph M.T., Department of Sociology, University of Mumbai. This is the e-Pathshala project on religion and society, and now we are in module 29, which talks about religious intolerance. Tolerance and intolerance are two different words used very specifically in the context of religion. Tolerance refers to a way in which we approach a person or a community of another religion. And tolerance is a word that has been widely used also by Mahatma Gandhi in India. Now in this module we look at the different ways in which tolerance has been identified, explained and practiced by different people in India, especially in the context of the boundaries set by religious communities. This is what we will see in this module. Section 1, Conceptual Understanding. Borrowing from John Locke, the author, Jeremy Waldrop provides an understanding of tolerance by noting that an argument which gives a reason for not interfering with a person's beliefs or practices even when we have reason to hold that those beliefs and practices are mistaken. Locke allows for intolerance that is necessary for the preservation of civil society. A well-known articulation of the defense of free speech has been given by Frederick Chauvet. He argues that government can't be trusted to discharge the task of intolerance correctly. Speech can harm in all kinds of ways, and there exists various rationale for putting up with these harms. He also says that there is still a reason to demand that the state tolerate many different kinds of speech, even harmful speech. And that is because there is no reason to think the state will make the right choice about which speech ought to be regulated. In John Stuart Mill's view, the practice of intolerance does not exist where power and force are used in a legitimized way. Intolerance in its proper sense only exists where an individual group or a state is applying a criterion more stringent than that favored by the critic who stigmatizes a policy as intolerant. Religious intolerance basically emphasizes the prejudice that exists within a religious group. It is this prejudice that functions as an ideology through which intolerance against the other comes to be represented. Such manifestations of intolerance are indicative of a prejudice that are deeply rooted in ignorance of the other. The development and articulation of prejudice in everyday life is a complex phenomenon that is tied up with processes of socialization, assimilation, as well as indoctrination. The existence of prejudice in everyday life presupposes the idea of a social group that is engaged in the practice of such prejudice. While it may be the case that the prejudice towards other religious communities results from an ignorance of the culture of these other communities, equally it could also be the outcome of long-standing experiences of discord and disharmony. It is these experiences that enter the socialization process and become a part of the process by which the individual is brought up to become a member of society. To that extent, then, it needs to be emphasized that religious intolerance is not just a momentary occasion of social discord, but rather a deep-rooted process involving whole institutions and normative practices that come together for the production and maintenance of religious discord within a society. In the consciousness of everyday life, religious intolerance constitutes a belief which privileges truth to oneself and untruth to the others. It is this practice of exclusion and superiority in the everyday life of a community that creates the grounds for intolerance against others whom it perceives as different from itself. In itself, having a belief that is different from others may not constitute intolerance, but such beliefs become the basis of intolerance when they get linked up with the other political, social and cultural agendas, wherein religious intolerance becomes a way of asserting one's identity and one's superiority over the other. In other words, what makes religious intolerance possible in any given society stems from the fact that those who practice religious intolerance deny to the others not only their right to hold on to their religious beliefs, but above all, as Arendt points out, they deny to them the very right to be humans. In mapping the contours of religious intolerance in society, it may be useful to observe the following features which exhibit various kinds of religious intolerance. Spreading hatred about an entire group, stating or implying that all members of a group are evil, behave immorally, commit criminal acts, etc. Ridiculing and belittling an entire faith group for their sincerely held beliefs and practices. attempting to force religious beliefs and practices on others against their will, restricting human rights of members of an identifiable religious group, devaluing other faiths as worthless or evil, inhibiting a freedom of a person to change their religion, refusing to acknowledge and support the right of individuals to have their own beliefs and related legitimated practices. Also, the unwillingness to have one's own beliefs and related practices critically evaluated. It is clear from the above characterization of the religious intolerance that such practices are to be found amongst all religious groups and in every part of the world. Clearly, what distinguishes one form of religious intolerance from another is the intensity of belief of its practitioners. In other words, there could exist forms of religious intolerance that may be condoned or pardoned, but it is those others that incite violence and criminality that are the cause of concern in all modern societies. Unlike pre-modern societies where religious groups are characterized by strong bonds of solidarity, modern societies are in general understood as being more enlightened and more tolerant. Its citizens come to accept that a critique of religion and its practices as part of a larger liberal universalist worldview. Martha Nussbaum says that we will often suffer from projective disgust, taking certain groups to have an exaggerated degree of characteristics connected to our animal nature, such as being smelly or dirty. Thus, fear can produce unreliable and unpredictable conduct, and it can be exploited by politicians eager to whip up aggression against unpopular groups. Section 2. Historical background of religious intolerance. In the 2nd century BC, Patanjali argued that the relationship between Brahmins and Buddhists is like that between the snake and the mongoose, and its actual violent manifestation is supported by a plethora of historical evidence. Similarly, there is copious proof of Shaiva-Vaishnava antagonism. In the 11th century, Al-Biruni argued that Hindus are haughty, foolishly vain, and self-conceited, and believe that there is no religion like theirs. In the 19th century, some Indians began to speak of the tolerance of Hindus, but they clearly privileged Hinduism over other religions. Dayanand Saraswati, who founded Arya Samaj in 1875, claimed to believe in a religion based on universal values above the hostility of all creeds. But as a champion of the Vedic religion, he sharply opposed all other religions. To him, Muhammad was an impostor and Jesus a very ordinary, ignorant man, neither learned nor a yogi. His contemporary Ramakrishna spoke of the equality of all religions, but in his view, the Hindu religion alone is the Sanatan Dharma. His disciple Vivekananda also laid emphasis on toleration and picked up the famous Rigvedic passage. Ekau sadvi pravaha buddha vadanti. Ekam sat vipraha bahudha vadanti. The wise speak of what is one in many ways, in support of his vision that India alone was to be the land of toleration. Similar views continued to be held by some leaders of the 21st century. Bal Gangadhar Tilak, for example, couched his views on the vocabulary of tolerance and quite often cited the above Rigvedic passage, but in reality espoused militant Hinduism. Even M.S. Golwalkar spoke of the Hindus as the most tolerant people of the world, despite the fact that he identified Muslims, Christians and communists as internal threats to the country. It would appear that these leaders, from Dayananda to Golwalkar, used tolerance as a camouflage for Hindu belligerence. They privileged Hinduism over other religions and did not provide enough space to them. The high point of religious intolerance in the 20th century must be seen in the partition of India that divided the subcontinent along religious lines. There can be no doubt that the partition served as one of those historical moments when religious intolerance was sought to be legitimized over all other considerations. As a society, we have continued to live with those fatal wounds that were inflicted on our collective consciousness, both as a society and as a nation. It is not surprising that ever since that eventful period marked with so much of bloodshed and violence, we have struggled to live as a society and a nation in harmony with itself and others. The post-independence history of India clearly reveals the vast amounts of intolerance that has been displayed between religious communities of all denominations. This intolerance displays various degrees of violence and aggression depending upon the levels of involvement from members of civil society. If there have been moments of great intolerance as displayed in the large-scale riots that have plagued society every few years, one must also take into account the constant state of tension that exists between religious communities over social, political and economic issues. While these may appear as acceptable practices of contest and competition between religious groups, it is important to note that these could very easily descend into situations of intolerance, leading to bloodshed and violence. What is important to note here in the context of religious intolerance is the practice of a majoritarian politics that seeks to dominate, discriminate and delegitimize all other religious communities. It is this majoritarianism that is constantly fueled by prejudice, fear and insecurity that promotes a communal disharmony that can easily descend into a condition of religious intolerance. The problem, however, is that majoritarianism is not the only side on which religious intolerance is practiced. Section 3. Religious intolerance amongst minority communities. According to HarperCollins Dictionary, Islamic fundamentalism means that the belief or advocating of a conservative adherence to literal or traditional interpretations of the Quran and the Sunnah. In the context of both politics and religion, Johannes Jansen identifies that avowed Islamic theological doctrines and ideas are the causes of fundamentalism. Islamic fundamentalists oppose to secularization in Islam and reassert traditional belief and practices. In other words, Islamic fundamentalism basically opposes any type of change in their strict code of behavior and reaction to the destructive effects of secular modernity and Western hegemony on Muslim society. We can mention here some example which is important to understand the Islamic fundamentalism and intolerance. Firstly, we can example like attack on Taslima Nasreen, whose critical comments on aspects of Islam have made her a prime target for fundamentalist elements in the Islamic world on South Asia. In India, a political party like Majlis-e-Ittihadul Muslimin attacks on Taslima Nasreen in her book launching in Karnataka. Muslims were saying that they can't accept the ridiculing of Islamic religion. The editorial titled Irrational Protests in the Hindu on the controversy exemplified this position, the need to neutralize the space of politics from religion. It said Islamist fundamentalist organizations rooted in religious obscurantism have long been prone to sudden bursts of irrational violence at the slightest provocation. The stone throwing and arson in Karnataka by fanatics were a nasty challenge to the freedom of expression guaranteed in the Indian constitution. In this the same example of a ban on Salman Rushdie's book, The Satanic Verses, the many Muslims accused Rushdie of blasphemy or unbelief, and in 1989 the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini of Iran issued a fatwa ordering Muslims to kill Rushdie. The strict enforcement of one interpretation of the Sharia or Islamic law could be regarded as the major symbol of Islamic fundamentalism. Sikhism, identity and intolerance. In the context of the religious fundamentalism in Sikhism, Punjab has been witness to the emergence of a large number of deras due to the continued social exclusion and pervading inequality in the social and economic order. They refuse to go away despite the rise of Sikhism, which in normative terms is opposed to caste-based discrimination and glorifies manual labor. There has been another factor that explains the marginal position of the Dalits in the region, and that is the concentration of land in the hands of a minority. Thus, the ever-increasing number of deras all over the Doaba, Majha and Malwa regions of Punjab is widely attributed to the denial of a respectable place to the Dalits and backward caste people in religious places and the Sikh Panth. The violence in 2009 in Punjab has taken place as a repercussion of the shootings in a Ravidas temple in Vienna, in which the Dera Sachkhand head Sant Niranjan Das was injured and his second-in-command Sant Ramanand was killed. This hurt the feelings of the followers of the Dera all over the world. The Doaba region in particular was in flames for almost 2 days before the situation came under control following the appeal by the sons of the Dera. The attack on the two sons and their followers is also due to the fundamental Sikh organization's objection to treating the Dera Gurus at par with the 10 Sikh Gurus and for keeping the Guru Granth Sahib along with the idols of Sant Ravidas. The recent Dera conflict in Punjab is incidentally not a new phenomenon. Before this, many conflicts between the radical or the fundamentalist Sikhs and Dera followers have taken place in Punjab. Mention can be made of the Sikh Nirankari conflict, Sikh Bhaniyarwala followers conflict, Sikh Sacha Sauda followers conflict, etc. Christianity and Intolerance. In this part, fundamentalism in Christianity will be covered with 2 examples from India. However, the usage of the term has acquired different meanings over a span of time. The Nationalist Liberation Front of Tripura is a Christian terrorist organization based in Tripura. This organization wants to separate it from India so that it can establish the kingdom of God and the Jesus Christ in Tripura. It works on the ideology of the Tripura nationalism and Christian fundamentalism. This organization has been working with the support of Baptist Church of Tripura, and the members in it are motivated by their Christian beliefs. Tribal people are forced to convert to Christianity and are also attacked if they do not follow the Christian agenda. Large-scale conversions have happened. If we talk about Christian Dalits in India, they feel double discrimination by the state and the church. In his article, Prakash Ruiz argued that Dalits who have converted to Christianity find that not only are the benefits of reservation not extended to them in the contravention of constitutional provisions, but even the church and the non-Dalit Christian community actively discriminates against them. Buddhism and Intolerance. Paul Fuller noted that the roots of intolerance might be found in the reaction of one Buddhist group to another. For example, although notoriously intricate, there appears to be something of the sectarian attitude in the emergence of Mahayana Buddhism. The Mahayana identified itself in opposition to what is termed Hinayana Buddhist groups. Due to this intention, we can see that uncompromising attitude of one school to the other school defined in the intolerance. On the other instance, the rise of Buddhism in the West pronounced the intolerance. The way of looking with stick of compassion by Asian or West on the Burmese Buddhist, it reflected the distance of the rest of the Buddhist world. But the other side of the practice of intolerance in Sri Lanka, the thing is different, where Buddhist monks construct their hegemony with the our belief is true and the rest is untrue and incomplete. The conflict between Sinhalese and Tamils in Sri Lanka is cause root of ethnic chauvinism. In April 2015, Buddhist bhikkhus stormed a mosque in central Sri Lanka and, claiming that it had been built on territory sacred to the Buddhists, demanded its immediate closure. Some Buddhist monks started selecting other targets for civil policing. Earlier this year, a group called itself the Buddhist Strength Force staged rallies in Colombo against the halal system of meat certification. In the last month, Buddhist monks have attacked Muslim teachers at a law college, accusing them of favoring their own kind, and called for the abolition of the abaya, the niqab and the hijab. We will fight until this attire is banned from this country so that there is no chance to unofficially enforce the Islamic Sharia in Sri Lanka. One monk says, in this module we have looked at religious intolerance, in the sense that the way that there has been certain kind of friction in India because people belonging to one religion or one religious formation have not been able to look favorably at the others. And why has this happened, and how have this come about, and how is it standing in the contemporary Indian scenario today? This is what we have looked at in this module. Thank you.